Welcome back and thanks for joining me. It's a garden video today and I'm starting off with my overwintered peppers. So after a few months in the basement, this is the status of the peppers that I saved from last summer. On this side, it looks like I've lost one of the Hungarian wax completely, and the tips of the other Hungarian wax are brown. And also in the middle there, it looks like I've also lost a habanero. So out of the 9 plants or 9 plantings, one is completely gone and half of one is gone. So my next step with these is going to be moving them into the indoor garden, but I have not done that yet. I'll probably do that next week. So this week, for prepping for the garden of summer 2022, I am transplanting the seedlings I started for my lavender, rosemary, and mint. So this is just how I separate them. I try not to wait until they are too big, and the lavender did have about 2 or 3 true leaves, and I'm just separating the little seedlings, and I'm going to separate each seedling into its own cell from being a couple of them in one cell at a time. You want to be very careful when you pull the seedlings apart. That's why I try to wait until they are a bit sturdier once they have 1 or 2 sets of true leaves versus the first leaves that open up. So I just continue to separate the seedlings until I had a couple of trays full of my lavender. And once I finished up with the lavender, I moved over to the mint. Now initially I was going to try to do 1 mint plant seed or seedling at a time, but there was just too many of them. So with my mint, unlike where I put 1 seedling at a time with the lavender, I did a bunch of them at one time just as a kind of test, and truly because I was being lazy. So I did a bunch of I did a bunch of mint at a time in each individual cell that I planted in. And the last item that I was transplanting out of a multi-sown cell is the rosemary. Now this is my first time planting rosemary, and I didn't get that great of a germination. So for next year I'm going to have to look at any tips and tricks that you need to do for rosemary. But once I transplanted everything, this is what I ended up with, and the 3 cells at the end are empty purposely. In addition to the lavender, rosemary, and mint, I also separated out my onion starts. I share my onions with my mother, so I ended up with 4 separate trays of yellow onions, red onions, and shallots. But I had so many that I did not do all of the shallots left, so that is something that I'm leaving for another day. I was just sick of planting onions at that point, but this is all the onions I have, and this is the onions that I had to get rid of. It definitely hurts taking out and sacrificing some, but I had way too many onions. And as an added bonus, I also planted some Scotch bonnets. So my mother, who is also gardening with me this season, wanted to try Scotch bonnets. So I ordered peppers from Pepper Joe. I didn't want to plant too many as I do have a lot of peppers already. So I am just planting 4 cells each of the red Scotch bonnets and the orange Scotch bonnets. Now with my plantings, I do put 2 seeds in at a time, but I don't thin out my seedlings. Each of the planting holes for my peppers will have 2 actual plants. Peppers do not mind being planted closely together. So instead of taking two separate cells, I just leave the two seedlings together, and if one doesn't come up, I'll combine with another one or do one planting. But to double my harvest, I do tend to plant two pepper seeds together. So here I'm just demonstrating another way to push the seeds into the soil. You can either make the hole beforehand, or you could push it down with the flat end of a pencil or the eraser end. But if you do it this way, you definitely want to check and make sure that you push the seed down and didn't pull it back up. But it is another way to make sure that you don't put your pepper too far into the soil. So once I've pushed it down where I feel satisfied with, just cover it back up, and that is now planted. The soil that I'm planting in this time is pre-moistened and pre-warmed. I had the time to do it, so I just did that beforehand, so I didn't have to water my seeds afterwards. And I'm really trying to be good this season with labeling. So as soon as these are planted, I am labeling these right away. And if I make a mistake, at least I have the record of what I planted. I ordered my Scotch bonnet seeds from Pepper Joe's, and they were nice enough to include 15 mystery seeds. It could be any one of these varieties that were just listed. Since I didn't know if it was a mixture of all of the seeds or 15 of the same, I did plant single ones here, which is not my usual, but once they come up, I can tell what they are. Once they bear fruit, I can tell what they are, but I'm going to treat these as two separate plantings and not combine them, as I am unsure of what the seeds are. And I'm going to push them down the same way, and then they get a question mark. Now these are super hots, and I have never planted super hots. I can barely tolerate habaneros, so I'm going to need to find some people that do enjoy super hot pepper. So recently I took a trip to my mom's house, and she invited me over to take a look at her Dracaena plant or corn plant. Her plant had just flowered and she was excited about it, but she also mentioned that the plant had a pup. I'm not sure if that is the appropriate name, but that's what I'm going to use because I'm familiar with using it for aloe. So she insisted that I take home the pup and try to raise up my own corn plant, and I couldn't say no. I actually said no, but my mom refused it. So this is just some footage of me removing the pup from the base of the plant. It seems very similar to what you would do for any other plant, just gently removing the seedling even though it doesn't have any of its own roots. And then once this is removed, it was recommended to trim off some of the leaves to bring it down to just about 3 or 4 leaves, and then plant it in a mixture of soil, sand, and perlite. You can also try to root it in water. Once it's planted in soil, it can take up to 2 months before it shows any roots and can be planted into a different medium. But this is my newest experiment to attempt, is starting my own Dracaena planting. And that concludes my garden update for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the content, and stick around and watch another video if you did. Thanks for watching.